The topic for today's lecture is tetanus and gas gangrene. Okay, so in this lecture, I will be talking about two main diseases caused by anaerobic organism, that is tetanus and gas gangrene. And I will be talking about the etiological agents which are causing these diseases, that is the bacteria which are belonging to genus Clostridium. Okay, so there are two main species, Clostridium perfringens, which is implicated in gas gangrene, and Clostridium tetani, which is causing tetanus. These two organisms will be discussed in today's lecture. So you must have heard about tetanus and gas gangrene. So can anyone tell me what is tetanus? Anyone can answer? Have you heard about tetanus? Okay, it is a soil-borne in nature lockjaw. Very good. Lockjaw is a common name for tetanus. Yes, there is a stiffness. Very good. Devarsh. Yes, tetanus toxin. It is basically toxin-mediated spastic paralysis. Very good. So you have some idea about tetanus and a little bit about the toxin also. Yes, very good, Sheetal, Mahika. So I will be talking about these two diseases in today's lecture. So before proceeding with the disease itself, let's see what all are the features of genus Clostridium. Okay, so Clostridium is basically the organism which are belonging to this genus are basically anaerobic organism. Okay, so anaerobic, you know anaerobic, it has been taught to you. So anaerobic organisms are those organisms which does not require oxygen. In fact, they do not grow in the presence of oxygen. So they will grow only when there is no free oxygen is available. So these organisms are basically having a anaerobic type of respiration. Okay. Secondly, these are basically gram-positive bacilli. Okay, so Clostridium is a gram-positive rod. Then third is these organisms are spore forming. So they are capable of spore formation. Okay, so this must have been taught you in the classification of anaerobes, where we can divide the anaerobes into non-sporing and sporing organism. And in sporing organism, the example is genus Clostridium. So can you name some other bacilli which are gram-positive and spore-forming? Can you give some example of other bacteria which are spore-forming, gram-positive? Yes, very good, Ansh, Khyati, Kartike, Bacillus. Okay, so Bacillus anthracis, very good, Shinu. So Bacillus is another organism which has spores. Okay, but the difference between Bacillus and Clostridium is that Clostridium is an anaerobic organism, right? And the Bacillus is an obligate aerobe. Okay, so जो metabolism है that is totally different, but Bacillus are also gram-positive spore-forming organisms. So coming to the genus Clostridium, they are basically saprophytes. So they are ubiquitous in nature. They will be found in soil, fresh water, marine water, decaying vegetation, animal matter, sewage. So basically they are present in environment and they are ubiquitous in nature. You will find them everywhere. And beside the environment, they are also commensals in the intestine of humans and animals. So they are also the part of human microbiota. Okay, so they are the part of own indigenous microbiota. They basically reside in the gastrointestinal tract of humans and animals. So if we see, most species are motile. Okay, so vegetative cells of these organisms will be motile, and motility will be through peritrichous flagella. Okay, but there are two exceptions, uh, which is Clostridium perfringens. Okay, Clostridium perfringens is responsible for gas gangrene, and another is Clostridium tetani type 6. Okay, so Clostridium tetani is basically responsible for tetanus, but there are different serotypes of Clostridium tetani. So type 6, the serotype 6 is basically non-motile. Okay, so other types of Clostridium tetani are motile. So most of the species are motile, but you have to remember only two species which are non-motile, that is Clostridium perfringens and Clostridium tetani type 6. Okay. Beside these two species, there are some other non-pathogenic species also which can be non-motile, but that is not important. So these two species, Clostridium perfringens and Clostridium tetani type 6, you should remember that they are non-motile. Then these organisms are non-capsulated. Okay, so generally Clostridium genus, it does not have any capsule. Okay, but again there are two exceptions. One is Clostridium perfringens, another one is Clostridium butyricum. Okay, so two species, perfringens and butyricum, they have capsule. A polysaccharide capsule is present in these two species. Okay, so these are the basically exceptions, which is sometimes asked in the viva. Now, if we see the different species of Clostridium, there are more than 60 species of Clostridium which are there. So, but most of the species are generally non-pathogenic. But the species which are medically important and are causing disease in humans, we can group them according to the disease that they cause. Okay, so we can group them into four categories: the one which is causing tetanus, another one which is causing gas gangrene, then food poisoning, and acute colitis, which is generally antibiotic associated. Okay, so tetanus is basically caused by Clostridium tetani, as the name suggests. Okay, then gas gangrene is caused by Clostridium perfringens. It was previously called as Clostridium welchi. Okay, so perfringens and welchi same cheese hai. Welchi was previously, it was known as Clostridium welchi. Now it is known as Clostridium perfringens. Most common cause is Clostridium perfringen, followed by Clostridium novi and Clostridium septicum. So these three species are basically the established cause of gas gangrene. Okay. Then other less common cause is Clostridium histolyticum, and other species like biofermenters, sporogenes. It is thought that they might cause gas gangrene, but they are kind of probable causes. They are not well established causes of gas gangrene. So when you are asked about the causative agent of gas gangrene, perfringens, novi, and septicum are the well established cause of gas gangrene, out of which Clostridium perfringen is the most common. Okay. Then coming to the food poisoning group. Now, there is a food poisoning which is leading to gastroenteritis. So, patient will present with diarrhea upon intake of uncooked or partially cooked meat or poultry. So, basically, these kind of food poisoning, which is of intermediate type, is caused by Clostridium perfringens type A. Okay, so there are different types of Clostridium perfringens. So, type A is mainly causing food poisoning. Okay. Then there is another species which is Clostridium botulinum. So again, it is causing a disease known as botulinum. It is again a kind of food poisoning. Okay, so these are the food poisoning group. Then another last one is acute colitis, in which there is inflammation of intestine with or without presence of pseudomembrane, and it is caused by Clostridioides difficile. Okay, it is basically associated with prolonged use of broad spectrum antibiotics, mainly clindamycin, cephalosporins. Okay, so Clostridioides, it was previously known as Clostridium difficile, But recently, the taxonomy has been revised, and this Clostridium difficile has been assigned a new genus, which is known as Clostridioides. Okay, so it is now known as Clostridioides difficile. So these are the various species of Clostridium which are medically important. So in general, if we see the morphology of genus Clostridium, so I told you they are basically gram positive. You know, they are basically rods, but they can be highly pleomorphic. Means they can have different shapes and sizes. So they can be present as filaments. Okay. Sometimes other kind of structures like leaf-like structures are present, which are known as citron bodies. Okay, so these kind of structures are generally seen in Clostridium septicum. Okay, so different kinds of sizes and shapes are there, but generally they are rods, and the size it ranges from 3 to 8 micrometer into 0.4 to 1.2 micrometer. Okay, so this is the vegetative cell which is there of Clostridium genus. Okay, so there is another feature, that is pore, which is the characteristic feature of this genus. Now, if we see the shape and position of these pores, so shape and position they varies according to different species. Okay, so in shape, there is also one feature that these spores are basically bulging spores. Now, what does it mean, bulging spores? It means that the spores will be wider as compared to the body of the organism. Outside, it will protrude outside the body of the organism. So they are known as bulging spores. They are characteristic bulging spores. So it gives a characteristic shape of a spindle. Okay. So in Greek, spindle means cluster. So hence, from that cluster word, this Clostridium nomenclature is derived, because it looks like spindle due to the presence of these bulging spores. Okay. So here in this picture, you can see that these are the gram-positive organisms in which in the center you can see the spores. So these spores are basically not stained by gram stain. So these are the empty spaces. Here you can appreciate. So these are the bulging spores which are present in Clostridium. Okay. So in contrast to the spores of genus Bacillus, in which these spores are basically not bulging. Okay. So they are present there, but they are not bulging outside. So this is the difference in the shape of the spores of Bacillus and Clostridium. Also, when we see the position here, you can see that in species like Bifurmentans, spores are present in the center. Okay, so these are oval shaped. So oval and central spores are present in Clostridium bifurmentans. Then most of the species of Clostridium, including Perfringens, it has subterminal spores. Okay. Then in Clostridium tetani, the spores are spherical, okay, and they are terminal. So it gives a characteristic drumstick appearance to the organism. Okay. So drumstick appearance is there of Clostridium tetani due to the presence of spherical and the terminal spores. Then again, there is another organism, Clostridium tertium, in which the terminal spores are present, but they are oval. Okay, so it gives an appearance of tennis racket. So these are just one word MCQ questions, like tennis racket appearance is seen in Clostridium tertium, drumstick appearance is seen in Clostridium tetani. Now, next is the degree of sporulation. Now, there are various factors you must be knowing. It has been taught to you, which are mainly general microbiology. That spores are generally the dormant form which found, which are when the organism is present in a harsh environment. Okay, so they are the dormant state. So the degree of sporulation, it varies from species to species. Okay, so it will be different for bifurcantans, it will be different for tetany. For example, Clostridium perfringens, the degree of sporulation in Clostridium perfringens is very low. So it generally does not form spores in animals and animal tissue and culture media. Okay, so special culture media are required to induce the sporulation in Clostridium perfringens. So those spores are generally not seen, but in other species, spores can be seen. So there is a variation in the degree of sporulation in different species as well. Okay. So now coming to the, am I audible? There is a problem in connectivity. Can anyone answer? Am I audible? Okay, thank you. Okay. So now coming to of these organisms. Now, Clostridium can grow on normal culture media, for example, blood agar. It can grow in liquid media that we use, such as cooked meat broth. These are generally anaerobic media that we use for the cultivation of anaerobes. Beside cooked meat broth, we can also use thioglycolate broth. So thioglycolate is basically in generation of anaerobiosis. So we agar or other ordinary media, and then we use anaerobic techniques like Macintosh Fields jar, enoxomat, anaerobic glove chamber, or we can use gas sac. So these techniques has already been discussed, so I will not go in detail. But Clostridium, when it grows in Robertson cooked meat broth, basically few species of Clostridium, they are saccharolated. Okay, they basically lyse carbohydrate. So there is a breakdown of carbohydrate. They are saccharolatic species. When they grow in cooked meat broth, there will be turbidity and the meat will turn pink. Okay. For example, Clostridium perfringens. And then there are certain species which are proteolytic. For example, Clostridium tetani. These species will turn the meat black. So there will be blackening of meat and there will be turbidity. So by these findings, we can narrow down the identification. Okay. So now coming to the Clostridium perfringens, this organism was first described in detail by Welch and Nuttall. So it was previously known as Clostridium welchi. As I told you, it is capsulated, it is non-motile, it is gram-positive bacilli. Okay. Now it bears subterminal bulging spores. Okay, and as I told you, the degree of sporulation varies. And in Clostridium perfringens, it does not produce spores in tissue or in culture media, especially the gas gangrene strains. Okay. Now this organism is both invasive as well as toxigenic. So ये organism toxin भी produce करता है and then it has capability to invade also. Okay. And it is commensal in large intestines of man and animals, and spores are generally present in environment. Okay, so they are commonly found in soil and dust. So these are the common feature of Clostridium perfringens. So now coming to the virulence factors of Clostridium perfringens, which is very important. So as I told you, this organism is basically toxigenic. So you can see that there are two types of toxins which are produced by this organism. One is the major toxin, another one is minor toxin. So there are total of four major engines. Okay, so these are alpha, beta, epsilon and iota. Okay, ये थोड़ा difficult होता है याद करने में starting में, ठीक है, थोड़ा revise करना पड़ेगा. And then there are 8 minor toxins which are gamma, delta, lambda, kappa, theta, eta, nu and nu. Okay, so total of 8 toxins, out of which 4 are major and 8 are minor toxins which are produced by this organism. Okay, beside that, there is type A Clostridium perfringens. It also produces a heat labile enterotoxin. जो food poisoning वाला strain था, type A Clostridium perfringens. So this enterotoxin is a heat labile and it is responsible for the food poisoning. Okay. Then there are certain other soluble substances which helps this organism to invade, like neuraminidase, histamine, bursting factor, circulating factor. So all these factors are basically helping this organism to invade. Okay, so it is both invasive as well as toxigenic. So when we talk about major toxin, जो alpha toxin है, okay, if we see chemically, it is a lecithinase C or phospholipase C. Okay, so basically it breaks down phospholipid. So lecithinase, as the name suggests, ये क्या करता है? ये lecithin पे act करता है. Okay, it is a kind of lipid and it is present in the membranes of cells. Okay, so lecithin को ये तोड़ेगा into phosphoryl choline, diphosphorylcholine and diglyceride. Okay, so phosphorylcholine and diglyceride में ये lecithin को तोड़ता है. ठीक है, so ये एक इसका ये function हो गया. Second function है, it has a sphingomyelinase activity. Now ये जो sphingomyelin है, it is also part of cell membrane of RBCs and cell membrane of other tissues such as nerve cells. Okay, so sphingomyelinase activity इसमें होती है. Third है, it also has a hemolytic properties. Okay, so hemolytic property होती है. Initially, it causes a incomplete hemolysis which is of alpha type. Later, when we further incubate the plates, it gets converted into complete hemolysis. Okay, so one is lecithinase B phospholipase C activity, another one is sphingomyelinase activity. Third is it is hemolytic as well. Okay, another feature is it also causes aggregation of neutrophils. It is a leukotoxic. So ये neutrophils के लिए it is toxic. That is why in the cases of gas gangrene, generally neutrophils are not seen when we perform gram stain or when we perform direct microscopy. So pustles and neutrophils are generally not seen because it is said that alpha toxin is toxic to neutrophils. Okay, so this is alpha toxin. Now another toxin is beta toxin, major toxin. है ना? It has also necrotizing activity. Okay, and it is generally seen in a condition which is known as enteritis necroticans. Enteritis necroticans is again a life-threatening condition in which there is a gas gangrene of walls of intestine. Okay, so large bowel का gas gangrene हो रहा है, basically intestine को affect करता है. So it is generally due to beta toxin. Okay, then another major toxin is epsilon toxin. It has also necrotizing activity just like beta toxin, but it is one of the most potent toxin of Clostridium perfringens. Okay, जो epsilon toxin है, it causes edema and hemorrhage in brain, in heart. Okay, and it is also a potential agent. It is also regarded as a potential agent of bioterrorism. Okay, so bioterrorism, it is also regarded as a class B agent of bioterrorism. Okay, then another is iota toxin. It has also a necrotizing activity. Now coming to the minor toxins, we have kappa. Kappa has a collagenase activity. Okay, then we have lambda. Lambda acts on gelatin, so it has a gelatinase activity. Okay, then delta toxin is there, which is again hemolytic. Okay, then mu toxin is there, which is a hyaluronidase. Okay, then new toxin is there, which is a deoxyribonucleases. Okay, then other toxins like gamma is there, eta is there. They are basically minor lethal toxins. So these are the various toxins of Clostridium perfringens along with their specific functions. One more toxin is there, which is theta toxin. It is also an important toxin because it is again hemolytic. Okay, and it resembles the streptolysin O, which is produced by group A streptococcus, and it has again cytolytic activity, and it is also a vasodilator. So this toxin is also implicated in gas gangrene. Okay, so what are the different types of Clostridium? So on the basis of alpha, beta, then epsilon and iota. Okay, we have classified Clostridium perfringens into 5 types: A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, so alpha toxins will be produced by all the types. A, B, C, D, E, all will be producing alpha toxin. Okay, then type B will be producing beta and epsilon toxin, okay, along with alpha toxin. And type C will produce beta toxin along with alpha toxin. Then type D will produce alpha and epsilon. Okay, and type E will produce alpha and iota. Okay, so this is how there are the various types of Clostridium perfringens. They are producing these different major toxins. Okay, now this type A is producing alpha toxin in abundance. Okay, so this is the main type which is implicated in gas gangrene. Okay, so type A is the main type which is responsible for gas gangrene, and this type A is also producing enterotoxin, which is heat labile and is responsible for food poisoning. Okay, so type A Clostridium perfringens will cause gas gangrene and food poisoning. Okay, then मैंने बीटा टॉक्सिन की बात करी थी, which is causing enteritis necroticans, है ना? So this is caused by mainly type C. ठीक है, so type C जो है वो alpha and beta toxin produce करता है, and beta toxin is also produced in abundant quantity. So this type is basically causing enteritis necroticans. Okay, so these are the various types of Clostridium perfringens. So if we see the clinical features, here it can cause wound infection, in which it can cause simple wound contamination. Simple wound contamination is generally seen in around 80% of wound, but further invasion does not occur. Okay, only invasion will occur if there is a proper conditions which are favorable for this organism to multiply, to germinate, spores to germinate, organism to multiply, and toxins will be produced. Okay, so it can cause simple wound contamination. Then it can go further and affect subcutaneous layer of skin. So it will cause anaerobic cellulitis. And further, when it will invade fascia and it will reach muscles and invade the muscles, then it will cause gas gangrene. Okay. Then enteric infection, I told you, type A is responsible for food poisoning. Type C is mainly responsible for enteritis necroticans. Enteritis necroticans is also known as pig bell. Okay, because it was seen in New Guinea. This infection was mainly associated with the consumption of pig. So there were pig feasts due to which the infection was occurring. So the common name of this infection is known as pig bill. Pig bell. Okay. Then it can also cause appendicitis, which is gangrenous. Then other infections of Clostridium are bacteremia, meningitis, brain abscess, panophthalmitis, puerperal infections, toxic shock syndrome, sepsis. So all these infections are basically other infections which can be caused by Clostridium perfringens if the infection further spread. Okay. Now coming to the gas gangrene. In the gas gangrene, basically what is happening, it is defined as a rapidly spreading edematous myonecrosis occurring in association with severely crushed wounds which is contaminated with pathogenic Clostridium. So as I told you, spores Clostridium ke environment mein present hote hain. So whenever there is a wound, spores will be there. Okay, but there has to be required conditions in which these spores are able to germinate into vegetative cells. Okay, so generally it is seen कि crushed and जो injuries होती हैं which are mainly associated with road traffic accidents or bullet injuries or open fractures, okay, in which the blood supply to that particular tissue is hampered, which will lead to, in those conditions, there are chances that Clostridium perfringens will able to cause infection. Okay, so generally these kind of, wherever there is a tissue anoxia. Okay, so next is it is also previously known as malignant edema or Clostridial myonecrosis. Okay, so this I have already told you, Clostridium perfringens is the of total cases is caused by Clostridium perfringens. Clostridium followed by Clostridium novi and septicum, but most of the time this gas gangrene is polymicrobial. Okay, so multiple organisms will be seen or isolated in the cases of gas gangrene. Okay, probable agents are Clostridium histolyticum, porogens, and other species, which are less common and less pathogenic. Okay, आपको बस perfringen, novi और septicum याद है. So how the gas gangrene develops? First of all, there is a requirement of anaerobic environment, which is produced whenever there is a crush injury, open fractures, whenever there is a disruption of tissue. Then there has to be a contamination of wound with Clostridial spores. So spores in the presence of anaerobic environment, which is caused by injury leading to hampered blood supply, will lead to gas gangrene. Okay. Very rarely, there is a spontaneous non-traumatic gas gangrene can occur due to patient's own microbiota. Okay, so it is generally seen in the cases of pulmonary malignancy, but these cases are very rare. Most of the injuries are basically due to crushed injuries. Now, the toxins which are mainly responsible, alpha toxin and theta toxin, Clostridium that belong to Clostridium perfringens. Okay. And then the other Clostridium species like Septicum and Novi, they also produce or secrete their own toxins like alpha, beta, gamma, proteases, neuroaminidases. So they also elaborate various kinds of toxins and enzymes which can cause gas gangrene. Okay. So if we see the clinical manifestation of gas gangrene, the incubation period is variable. So for Clostridium perfringens, it is 10 to 48 hours. But it may vary for septicum and novi, it can be in days. Okay? So there is a sudden onset of excruciating pain at the affected site. So pain will be there, followed by rapidly developing foul smelling, thin sanguineous discharge. Okay. So it is a very malignant condition. It is a rapidly progressive condition, and it is a true emergency. Okay. So in these, we can also see gas bubbles, which are also known as crepitus in the muscle veins. Therefore, it is known as gas gangrene. These gases are basically probably resulting due to the anaerobic respirations of these organisms, leading to fermentation and production of abundant carbon dioxide and hydrogen in abundance. Okay, so gas bubbles are there. Then briny edema and induration. So edema is there, but that edema is very hard. So when you press the edema, it will not be pressed. Okay, so when you palpate it, it will not get pressed. So it is very hard. So further leading to liquefaction and slowing of the tissue. Further shock and organ failure might develop if patient goes into sepsis. So mortality rate is very high, it is around 50%. So it is a true emergency. So when we talk about laboratory diagnosis of gas gangrene, again, it is a true emergency and the diagnosis is mainly based on clinical grounds. So on the basis of clinical grounds, the diagnosis is made, laboratory diagnosis is supportive. So you should not wait till the laboratory reports come. Okay, so because it is an emergency condition. So however, for the laboratory diagnosis, the specimen that should be taken are necrotic tissue, muscle fragment, or exudates from the deeper parts of the wound. So you know that for the anaerobic infection, these acceptable specimens are the one which are collected from the deeper part of the tissue. Then the chances of recovery of these organisms is high. Otherwise, collection of swab or superficial specimen, the organism will die. So and in swab, the organism will not be there. So these are not acceptable samples. Generally, the samples which are collected from the deeper parts are the accepted as a specimen. Then one another aspect is the specimen transport. This already has been taught to you. Transport is also important because we need to, we want that the anaerobic, these organisms remain viable while the sample is getting transported from the hospital to lab. So various commercially available transport uh, media are there. Otherwise, if the commercially available media is not there, then the specimen can be collected in airtight container, screwed and sent to the lab immediately. Also, if you fluid through syringe, then air should be expelled out. It should not be recapped, and the needle should be again blocked and sealed with the help of cork. So these are some other methods by which we can prevent the dying of organism during transport. But otherwise, commercially available transport media are preferred. Then coming to the direct microscopy, now, on microscopy, as I told you, in human tissue and in culture, the spores are generally not present. So these organisms will be seen as thick, stubby, boxcar-shaped, gram-positive bacilli, okay, without spore. So if you see thick, stubby, boxcar-shaped bacilli, gram-positive bacilli without spore, with the associated clinical symptoms, then it is suggestive of Clostridium perfringens. Then we can also do the culture. They will readily grow on ordinary media. We can use blood agar, or we can use bioglycolate broth. And then there is another media which is egg yolk agar, which is used for Clostridium perfringens. It has a egg yolk and 20% human serum. So again, this media can also be used for the isolation of Clostridium perfringens. Okay. Then when we inoculate any sample on the liquid media, we incubate it for 24 to 48 hours, and when the turbidity appears, we again subculture it on solid media, because properly identify the organism in the liquid media. So we need to subculture it on solid media to identify the colonies and to further proceed with staining and biochemical reactions. Then anaerobic incubation should be there. Temperature is generally optimum at 37 degrees Celsius, and anaerobic environment is maintained by gas pack and inoxomat or other methods which is available. So identification is generally done by, one thing is target hemolysis, another one is Naegler's reaction. Okay. Then another test that we perform is reverse CAMP test. Then in litmus milk, it produces stormy clot reaction, which is also known as stormy fermentation. Then we can also perform certain biochemical reactions. Then there are automated methods like Vitek and Malditov, and we can also perform animal pathogenicity testing. Okay. So in biochemical reaction, as I told you, Clostridium perfringens is basically saccharolytic and it ferments various carbohydrates. It ferments glucose, sucrose, mannose, lactose. It is indole negative. It also produces hydrogen sulfide gas, and it is nitrate positive. Okay, so these are the various biochemical reactions. Uh, then there is another thing which is a stormy fermentation. So what is happening in this case? We are basically taking milk, which is a litmus milk. Okay, so in milk there is a protein which is known as casein, right? And in the milk there is a lactose. So this organism will ferment lactose, and due to the fermentation of lactose, there will be production of acid and gas. Okay. Now this acid will combine with casein and lead to formation of clots. So basically it will clot the milk, and there will be presence of enormous amount of gas. Okay. So it gives an appearance of stormy clot reaction. Okay. So clots, there is a coagulation of milk, and that milk, due to the presence of excessive gas, it is basically stuck to the walls of tubes. Okay, so this is known as stormy fermentation. Okay, so another thing is target hemolysis. Target hemolysis is basically another feature which is shown by this organism, in which we see that there is a colony and there is a narrow zone of complete hemolysis, okay, followed by a wider zone of incomplete hemolysis. Okay, so this complete hemolysis is caused by beta toxin, and this incomplete hemolysis is caused by alpha toxin. Okay, so these kind of structures, these kind of hemolysis is seen in Clostridium perfringens. Then another feature is Naegler's reaction. So what is Naegler's reaction? As I told you, it has a lecithinase, alpha toxin has a lecithinase B activity. So if the Clostridium perfringens is growing, it will produce alpha toxin, and it will act on lecithin in egg yolk, and it will degrade it and form lipids. Okay, so these lipids will get deposited around the colonies of the organism. Okay, so this opacity is seen when the Clostridium perfringens, it grows on the egg yolk agar. Okay, so we also put on the other half of agar, we also add anti-alpha toxin as a control. Okay, so where there is a anti-alpha toxin, there will be no opacity, and where there is no antitoxin, there will be opacity around the colonies. So this is another method for the identification of Clostridium perfringens, and it is known as Naegler's reaction. Then another one is Clostridium perfringens CAMP test, reverse CAMP test. So can anyone tell me what is CAMP test? For which organism CAMP test is performed? Yes, very good. It is Ansh and Prakhar. It is done for group B streptococcus. That is, जैसे picture में दिखा रहे हैं, streptococcus A galacti. So generally, CAM test is used for the identification. हम identify करते हैं group B streptococcus, है ना, camp में, and we use staphylococcus aureus, है ना, in CAM test. So we take a culture media blood agar, हम परपेंडिकुलरली सॉरी एक लीनियर स्ट्रीक करेंगे एस ऑरियस का, स्टेफाइलोकोकस का, और फिर परपेंडिकुलर हम स्ट्रीक करते हैं जो हमारा टेस्ट ट्रेन होता है. तो इफ इट इज ग्रुप बी स्ट्रेप्टोकोकस, तो बटरफ्लाई काइंड ऑफ हिमोलिसिस हमें दिखती है. इट इज बिकॉज ऑफ प्रोडक्शन ऑफ कैम फैक्टर फ्रॉम द ग्रुप बी विच एनहांसेस द beta hemolysin activity of S. aureus. Okay, so CAM test is basically for the identification of group B streptococcus, in which we are using S. aureus. In reverse CAM, what we are doing, same principle hai, but in this we are identifying Clostridium perfringens. So Clostridium perfringens ko we are identifying and we are using GBS. इसलिए इसको बोलते हैं रिवर्स कैम, बिकॉज वी आर यूजिंग अ नोन स्ट्रेन ऑफ ग्रुप बी of Clostridium perfringens. Group B streptococcus, again the hemolysis of Clostridium perfringens will be enhanced and there will be a butterfly shaped hemolysis that will be seen. So this is known as reverse CAM test. CAM is basically acronym for Christie, Atkins and Munch Peterson. These were three scientists which basically performed or basically discovered this test. Okay. So then there is an animal pathogenicity testing which we perform in guinea pig, in which we basically give 1.1 ml of cooked meat broth solution to the guinea pig, iron for 24 hours, and we also take a control strain which has been already treated with antisera. So the test organism, control organism will remain alive. So these animal pathogenicity testings are basically obsolete. So treatment is basically the early surgical debridement. So most crucial step is there in the management of gas gangrene, and the antibiotics which are used are generally which are used for anaerobic organisms such as penicillin, clindamycin. Hyperbaric oxygen can also be used to kill the obligate anaerobic Clostridia. And passive immunization with anti-alpha toxin antiserum can be done. Active immunization is not available. Okay, so basically this is how we treat the cases of gas gangrene. So now coming to the next organism, which is Clostridium tetani. So Clostridium tetani is responsible for tetanus. Now, what is tetanus? According to CDC definition, it is an acute illness with muscle spasm or hypotonia in the absence of more likely diagnosis. So again, the diagnosis is mainly based on clinical ground. Okay? So in tetanus, there is a skeletal muscle spasm. As you told, there is a rigidity, and also there is a autonomic nervous system disturbance. Okay? Now, this tetanus is caused by the organism which is Clostridium tetani. It is obligate anaerobic organism. So Clostridium perfringens, it can tolerate slight amount of oxygen, like 0.5 to 2% of oxygen. It can tolerate for few hours. But the Clostridium tetani hai, it is a strict anaerobe. Okay? It will not tolerate any percentage of oxygen. So it will grow only in the presence, only in the absence of free oxygen. Again, it is a gram-positive bacilli, terminal round spore with drumstick appearance. Okay. So if we see, generally, जो Clostridium tetani है, it is a rod-shaped and there are a peritrichous flagella. So these are the vegetative cells of Clostridium tetani. सिर्फ type 6 है, which is non-motile. So when it matures, it starts ovulating and then it forms a terminal oval spores. Okay, so this is how, so in early cultures, vegetative cells will be seen, but in older culture, correlating forms can also be seen. And these correlating forms somehow they also are gram variable. So SMEH's correlating form of Clostridium tetani will always be seen as gram positive. They can also be seen as gram negative. Okay, so older cultures, older और जैसे जैसे organism mature होता जाएगा, some gram variability is also there in Clostridium tetani. So serological classification of Clostridium tetani is mainly based on the presence of flagellal antigen. It has a flagella, and on the basis of that H antigen, Clostridium tetani has been divided into 10 serotypes, 1 to 10. Okay, and out of that, those 10 serotype 6 is non-motile. Now, coming to the pathogenesis of the virulence factor, it produces two types of toxin. One is tetanolysin, another one is tetanospasmin. So tetanolysin is heat labile, oxygen labile, hemolysin. So it is a hemolysin, but its role in the pathogenesis of tetanus is not known. Okay, so it हमें नहीं पता कि इसका पैथोजेनेसिस में कोई रोल है या नहीं, इट इज अनक्लियर, बट इट इज अ काइंड ऑफ हिमोलिसिस जो कि ब्लड अगार में हिमोलिसिस प्रोड्यूस करेगा, राइट. Our main concern is tetanospasmin or tetanus toxin. So it is a heat labile or structure, and it is oxygen stable. It is a neurotoxin which is responsible for tetanus. It is coated by plasmid, okay, and also it is highly antigenic. Okay, so these are the various features of tetanospasmin, and chemically it is a protein which is of 150 kilodalton. When it is released extracellularly, it gets broken down into heavy chain and light chain. Okay, so this is heavy chain, this is light chain, and these two chains are bound by disulfide bond. And this heavy chain is 100 kilodalton. This light chain is 50 kilodalton. Now this light chain is basically the active pigment. Okay, heavy chain, it basically forms channels. It forms channels through which light chain is transported. Okay, and light chain is released. This light chain will act. It is basically a proteolytic enzyme. So it will act on a protein which is known as synaptobravin. Okay. Now this synaptobravin protein is for the release of inhibitory neurotransmitters. Okay. So these inhibitory neurotransmitters like GABA. So GABA neurotransmitters का जब presynaptically that, so it requires a protein known as synaptobravin. So this toxin is basically causing breakdown of this synaptobravin, due to which release of GABA will not be there. Okay. So mode of transmission is basically due to injury that can be superficial, punctured, or road traffic accident. Surgery, if it is performed without any proper asepsis, okay, then maternal and neonatal tetanus is also there, which can occur due to unhygienic practices followed during delivery or due to abortions, septic abortion. Then otitis media can also occur, leading to autogenic tetanus. One thing you should remember that there is no person-to-person spread in tetanus, so it is not contagious. Okay, so person-to-person transmission is not there. So what is the exact mechanism of tetanus toxin? As I told you, the point that you should remember that it acts presynaptically. Okay, it basically it blocks the release of GABA. Okay, due to which inhibitory neurons will not be able to act. Okay, due to which there will be hyperexcitation and rigidity and spasticity. Okay, so normally what happens when we talk about motor system, जो सिग्नल है इट कम्स फ्रॉम प्राइमरी मोटर कॉर्टेक्स, है ना. सो प्राइमरी मोटर कॉर्टेक्स से फर्स्ट नर्व्स हैं दे अराइव इन स्पाइनल कॉर्ड, एंड फ्रॉम स्पाइनल कॉर्ड पेरिफेरल न्यूरॉन्स जो हैं दे टेक द सिग्नल टू द मसल्स, है ना. सो दिस इज हाउ द descending pathway is there for the muscle contraction. There are also certain inhibitory interneurons which are present in spinal cord as well as in the brain stem, जो कि उस एक्साइटेटरी न्यूरॉन्स को चेक में रखते हैं. ओके, सो अब क्या हो रहा है कि जो टेटनस टॉक्सिन है इट इज बेसिकली इनहिबिटिंग दोस इनहिबिटरी न्यूरॉन्स. तो जो इनहिबिटरी न्यूरॉन्स हैं दे विल नॉट बी एबल टू इनहिबिट द एक्साइटेटरी signals which are coming from the upper motor neurons to the lower motor neurons, okay, and due to which there will be no cycle of contraction and relaxation. So there will be sustained contraction. Okay, so this is what I'll show you. So here you, in the video you can see that excitatory neurons, they are coming from the primary cortex and then they are reaching spinal cord. Okay, cranial nerves के case में they will reach brainstem, and in other peripheral nerves they will reach the spinal cord, and through axon they are reach muscle fiber, and there is a neuromuscular junction. And also there are certain inhibitory neurons which forms the part of spinal inhibition. So inhibitory neurons and excitatory neurons, they act together for the optimum contraction of the muscles. Okay, so this is occurring in a normal condition. But what is happening in tetanus? Now there is a failure to release of neurotransmitter from these inhibitory neurons. And inhibitory neurons के जो neurotransmitters होते हैं, they are generally GABA. Okay, excitatory में glutamate होता है या acetylcholine in muscles, and GABA in inhibitory neuron. Now, neuromuscular junction, what is happening whenever there is a wound contamination and conditions are there, appropriate conditions are there for the Clostridium tetani spore to germinate, then it will germinate. It will get converted into a vegetative cell. Now, this bacteria will release toxin, tetanus toxin, and this toxin is basically taken up by the axonal terminal. And through retrograde, the term आपको याद रखनी है, retrograde transport, axonal transport, it is transported to the spinal cord, and in this synaptic area, it will reach the presynaptic terminal. Okay, so in the presynaptic terminal of the inhibitory neurons, this toxin is basically in the vesicle. Okay, so now there will be acidification of these vesicles, due to which there will be the disulfide bond which is there for the heavy chain and light chain, it will be broken down. Okay, and then what will happen, this heavy chain will form a channel and this light chain will come outside. Okay, so इस तरह से इसका टॉक्सिन का रिलीज होगा. अब नॉर्मल कंडीशन में क्या हो रहा है, दिस इज अ साइनेप्टिक वेसिकल एंड दीज आर द न्यूरोट्रांसमीटर्स व्हिच आर द गाबा, एंड जो ये हुक लाइक रेड कलर स्ट्रक्चर आप देख रहे हो, दीज आर साइनेप्टोब्रेविन. ठीक है, these synaptobravins are basically helping in the attachment of these vesicles to the receptor and leading to release of neurotransmitters, GABA neurotransmitters normally. But what is happening, जो tetanus toxin है, it has a proteolytic activity, it will break the synaptobravin. Okay, तो अगर synaptobravin टूट गया, so there will be no release of these GABAergic neurotransmitter, and hence there will be excitation, hyperexcitation, leading to spasticity and rigidity. So this is how the tetanus toxin works. So incubation period varies. It is around 7 to 10 days. There are generally 4 clinical types. One is localized type, which involves the affected limb. When it is mild, it affects the local limb only. When it is generalized, when the large amount of toxin is produced, then whole body is affected. But the first part that is affected is the head and neck area. Okay, because probably it is because the distance for the toxin to travel from that region is lesser. Okay, so these are the first symptoms that will appear, like rhizus sardonicus, in which there is a contraction of muscles of lips, orbicularis oris. Then there is the masseter rigidity leading to trismus. Then again it will progress leading to abdominal rigidity, and the spastic paralysis is descending type. Okay. Then there is another position in which there is a flexion of limbs and upper limbs and extension of lower limbs. Characteristic position is there of scotola. And then further respiratory spasm may occur leading to death. Then sometimes only cephalic nerves are affected, then it is cranial nerves are affected, then it is a cephalic tetanus. Then neonatal tetanus, as I told you, is again, it is a kind of generalized tetanus only, but it is occurring in neonates. Then autonomic disturbance is there, in which there is a hypersecretion of catecholamines leading to higher or lower blood pressure, tachycardia, intestinal status, sweating, increased tracheal secretions, acute renal failure. So both muscle spasm as well as autonomic disturbance is seen. So this is a picture showing rhizus sardonicus, and this is a typical opisthotonus position in tetanus. So this is just a picture showing the progression of tetanus. When there is a wound multiplication, there is no symptom. After the incubation period of 7 to 10 days, tetanus toxin has been taken up, and now it is inhibiting the neurons. So initial symptom will be muscle ache, trismus, and myalgia. And after that, few hours, muscle spasm will develop. So this is incubation period, and this period is period of onset. Okay, so the progression of disease, prognosis of disease, it depends upon the incubation period and period of onset. So lesser the incubation period, lesser the period of onset, graver the prognosis. Okay. Now, epidemiology, tetanus is more common in developing countries. It occurs in warm climate, rural area with fertile soil, unhygienic surgeries or deliveries, and incidence decreases due to widespread immunization of infants and pregnant mothers. So coming to the laboratory diagnosis, specimen collection same तरीके से करना है. Microscopy में gram positive bacilli दिखेंगे with terminal and round spores, which will be drumstick appearance. So same Robertson cooked meat broth हम लेंगे, but in which the meat will turn black because it will show proteolytic activity. It will grow in blood agar. You can make it selective by the addition of certain antibiotics to inhibit the growth of other organisms. Now, one characteristic feature is it shows a swarming growth in on blood agar. So this is again important that this is a species of Clostridium that shows a characteristic film-like growth, that is swarming growth over the blood agar. Okay. Now again I will basically again I will say that the laboratory diagnosis of tetanus is mainly based on clinical grounds. Okay, so the diagnosis of tetanus is mainly based on clinical grounds. So laboratory diagnosis is only done to confirm it, but otherwise it is based solely on clinical grounds. So toxigenicity testing can be done, in which we can take mice and we can inoculate cooked meat broth 0.2 ml into the tail. Okay, and we can also take the control strain, which is already given 1000 international unit of antitoxin. So test strain जो है उसमें क्या होगा? There will be rigidity of the tail. Okay, so this is the basically seen after 24 hours in the toxigenicity testing, and after 72 hours the animal generally dies. So these tests are generally obsolete. So what is the treatment of tetanus? Stabilization of the patient is paramount. So when the patient arrives, the airway should be secured, endotracheal intubation, early tracheostomy, these all are the things that are done. Antispasmodic are done to eliminate reflex spasm. Beta blockers are given to control the sympathetic hyperactivity. So stabilization of patient is done. Then passive immunization is given, tetanus immunoglobulin, which can be a human tetanus immunoglobulin or anti-tetanus serum, which is equine derived. Both can be given. The dosage is 250 international units for HTIG and 1500 international unit of ATS. It is generally given 0.5 ml single dose IL. Generally, the disadvantage with the equine derived antisera is that it leads to hypersensitivity reaction. So, before giving equine derived ATS, generally skin test is done. Okay, so this is the one of the disadvantage. The effect of HTIG, it lasts for 1 month, and for ATS, that is equine derived, it lasts for 7 to 10 days. Sometimes, if the patient is non-vaccinated, then combined immunization is given. But both combined means when the both active immunization is given and passive immunization given simultaneously, but the site should differ. Okay. Then antibiotics are given, they are supportive. They generally do not neutralize the toxins, so they have a minor role. So generally metronidazole, penicillin can be given. Then isolation of the patient. Isolation of patient is generally done not because the disease is contagious or there is a person-to-person transmission. Isolation is done because sometimes noise or light can lead to convulsions or painful spasm in the patient. So it can exacerbate the spasm in the patient. So patient needs to be in isolation. Okay. Then, of course, nutritional support should be there. So there are different protocols which are followed. It will be probably taught to you in medicine about the treatment. So this is in general how we manage the case of tetanus. So prevention, it is also present in the form of monovalent or combined vaccine, in which the toxin has been converted into toxoid with the help of formaldehyde or formalin. Okay, so combined vaccine can be given along with diphtheria, toxoid, and pertussis, or with diphtheria along TD, or pentavalent vaccine along with Hib and hepatitis B vaccine. Okay, so generally in childhood, 5 doses should be given, followed by 2 doses in adult immunization. So in national immunization schedule, it is given along with pentavalent vaccine as 6, 10, and 14 weeks of birth, and then 2 booster doses of DPT are given at 16 to 24 weeks and 5 years. Then again at 10 and 16 years, 2 doses are given. Okay, so this vaccine is basically can be in a plain form, or it can be in the adsorbed form, which is generally in aluminum phosphate or aluminum hydroxide. So both can be given, and intramuscularly it is given 0.5 ml in deltoid or in anterolateral aspect of thigh in children. So protective titer is generally more than equal to 0.01 unit per ml. Okay. So this is about the vaccination. So it is generally, this table is basically showing the prevention of tetanus after injury. So suppose the patient has taken the complete course of vaccine within 5 years, and the patient is not tetanus prone, like there is no contamination of wound, it is a clean wound, then nothing is required. If the patient has taken vaccination in between 5 to 10 years, then 1 dose of TB is given in both the cases. And if the vaccination has been given more than 10 years back, then if it is a clean wound, then 1 dose is given. And if it is a contaminated wound, then dose of active vaccine plus immunoglobulins are given. Okay. And if the vaccination status of the patient is not known, then complete dose should be given in clean wound, and in contaminated, complete 3 doses are given along with immunoglobulin. So generally it is said that after every 10 years, booster dose for the tetanus should be repeated. Okay. So there is another term which is maternal tetanus. It is basically defined by WHO as a tetanus which is occurring during pregnancy or within 6 weeks after the end of pregnancy. So it can be, pregnancy can end with birth, it can end with miscarriage, or it can end with abortion. Okay. So this is how the WHO has defined tetanus in mothers. It is maternal tetanus. Now, neonatal tetanus is defined as an illness which is occurring in child who loses ability to suck and cry between day 3 and 28th day of life. Neonate, 28th day, and becomes rigid and has spasm. Okay, so it is also known as 8th day disease because generally the symptoms starts appearing at the 8th day. Most common reason is the unhygienic practices during delivery, like application of cow dung on the umbilical cord. Okay, so it is again seasonal, generally occurring during summer and monsoon areas, monsoon months. Then how can we prevent neonatal tetanus? Basically, by discouraging home deliveries and promoting hospital or attendant deliveries, following aseptic clean practices like clean hand, clean surface, clean blade for cutting cord, right? Clean water, and also during pregnancy, during second trimester, 2 doses of tetanus vaccine is given to the mothers at the duration of 1 month apart. Okay, so 2 doses of tetanus vaccine is given to prevent the maternal and the neonatal tetanus. So, what is the situation of neonatal tetanus? India has achieved the elimination status for the neonatal tetanus in 2015. Okay, so it has been eliminated, but uh, it has not been eradicated because it is not Clostridium tetani are ubiquitous in nature. So it is not able to completely eradicate like smallpox, but we can achieve the elimination status. So WHO has defined the elimination as when the annual rate of the cases, it becomes less than 1 per 1,000 live birth per year in every country. So every 1,000 live birth, the cases are less than 1 annually, then we say that the neonatal tetanus has achieved the elimination status. So this definition has been given by WHO. So this was all about and the gas gangrene. So, first question is, which of the following species of Clostridium is non-motile? Yes, it is B, Clostridium perfringens. Very good, all of you. Then Nagler's reaction is used for the identification of, yes, which one? A, B, C, D. Nagler's reaction. Clostridium tetani, perfringens, botulinum, novi. It is basically done for Clostridium perfringens. Very good. सबने सही करा है. ख्याति, कीर्ति, अर्वची, प्रखर, अक्षरा, अंश, शीतल, अनमोल, याशिका, वंशिका. Then drumstick appearance of spores is seen in Clostridium perfringens, Clostridium tertium, Clostridium tetani और Clostridium botulinum. Drumstick appearance किसमें दिखेगा? It is seen in Clostridium tetani. Very good. Tennis racket में किसमें दिखेगा? Tennis racket appearance किसमें दिखेगा? B, tertium. Very good. Khyati and Prakhar, Mahika. Now, the last question is, which of the following species of Clostridium shows swarming on blood agar? तो blood agar में कौन सी species है जो swarming show करती है? Clostridium perfringens, botulinum, tetani, all of the above. Very good. Clostridium tetani, Anshikal Shreya. Swarming on blood agar is seen in Clostridium tetani. Can you name some other organism which shows swarming on blood agar besides Clostridium tetani? Yes. Very good. Proteus, है ना? So main example swarming का Proteus है, but anaerobic में जो organism है which can show swarming, not as obvious as it is in Proteus, but a slight film is there which can be seen with Clostridium tetani. Okay. So this was all about gas gangrene and tetanus. Any question you would like to ask? Mahika has asked about anaerobic cellulitis. Anaerobic cellulitis is when the infection is occurring in the subcutaneous layer or the fascia, but it has not invaded fascia and has not reached the muscle. So it is in between the superficial infection and this gas gangrene. Okay. So it will further, when the organism further invade, it will further lead to muscle invasion leading to gas gangrene. So any other question? All clear? Ma'am, could you explain mechanism of action of tetanus toxin? Okay, do you want me to draw it again or show the video, or shall I explain it like that one? So, okay, I'll just, okay, short video, just this. Okay, so basically what is happening, this must have been taught you in physio, है ना, कि जब जो हमारे motor pathways हैं, they start from brain. Okay, so motor cortex, they stop in brainstem and spinal cord, and from spinal cord there are nerves which take the signal to the muscle, you know. So these axon will end in the neuromuscular junction and they will end in muscle fiber. Now there are certain spinal inhibition also by certain inhibitory neurons at the level of spinal cord and brainstem, okay, which basically what they are doing, they are optimizing the excitatory neurons so that there is no hyper excitation. So the function of inhibitory neurons, proper functioning of inhibitory neurons is required for the proper contraction and relaxation of muscles. Now this tetanus toxin, it basically inhibiting the release of neurotransmitter from those inhibitory neurons. Okay, so that the those inhibitory neurons will not be able to act properly. So in muscles, whenever there is a and the environment is anaerobic, Clostridium tetani spores will germinate, and after it germinate into vegetative cell, these bacteria spasming. Okay, now these tetanospasm, this is occurring in neuromuscular junction at the muscle level. Now through axonal, retrograde axonal flow, okay, it will reach. It is traveling inside the nerve only. Okay, so it will reach the spinal cord in the ventral horn of the spinal cord. एंड देन फ्रॉम द स्पाइनल कॉर्ड जहाँ पे साइनेप्स हो रहा है इनहिबिटरी न्यूरॉन्स और इन न्यूक्लियाई के बीच में, ये जाके प्री साइनेप्टिक टर्मिनल्स में चला जाएगा. ओके, so it has entered those inhibitory neurons, okay, which are required for the normal functioning of. So now in the inhibitory neurons, it is in the vesicle, and there is a acid which break the disulfide bond which is connecting the heavy chain and light chain. So I told you heavy chain will act as a channel and light chain will come outside. Now normally what is happening in the inhibitory neurons, there is a synaptic vesicle which consists of neurotransmitter, and inhibitory neurotransmitters are generally GABA. GABA and glycine, these are the inhibitory neurotransmitters. And they require the synaptobravin, which is VAMP. It is normally required for the release of these GABA neurotransmitters from the inhibitory neurons. But whenever toxin, it will break the synaptobravin. This light chain will break the synaptobravin. So this neurotransmitter will not be able to release. So now the inhibitory neurons will not be able to inhibit the excitatory stimulus that is coming from the brain. Okay, so normally for the muscle contraction, there are agonist and antagonist muscles. So there is basically alternate contraction of these muscles leading to contraction and relaxation. But whenever their inhibitory neurons khatam ho gaye, so everything is now excitatory. So agonist, antagonist, each muscle will simultaneously contract, leading to hyperrigidity and spasm. Okay. Now, if there is a generalized tetanus, this spasm will first appear in the head and neck area, uh, causing lockjaw, trismus, and causing rhizus sardonicus. Then it will further progress to abdomen in a descending form. Okay, so descending spastic paralysis is there, and then it will progress further. So this is how the tetanus. Okay, so any other question? Okay, so any other doubt from gas gangrene? Yes? Shall we stop? Okay then. So I'm logging off. Thank you very much.